background or the past trends which were there in India's export performance, the highest ever merchandise exports that India had was 330 billion. This was in 2018-2019. This came down slightly in 2020-21 to 291. This was primarily on account of the COVID pandemic and its fallout. The highest ever monthly export figure that we had achieved till last financial year was 34 billion, and this was in March 2021. Keeping all of this in mind and the clarion call given by the Prime Minister, the target of 400 billion was set for the current year, and ever since, Department of Commerce has been very actively monitoring the targets and the progress and trying to resolve any bottlenecks if at all. We've been doing this with all the missions, with the concerned commodity, with the concerned EPCs, exporters, industry bodies. Next slide, please. Briefly, I'll touch upon the achievement for the month of December and also for cumulative for this year. Export in December has touched a high of 37.29 billion. This is the highest ever monthly achievement till date. This represents an increase of 37% over the figure in 2020 and 37.55 over the figure in 2019 December. When we talk of cumulative, April to December 2020, the export performance in merchandise exports has crossed 300 billion, which exceeds the exports of the entire financial year 2021. This represents an increase of over 48% over April to December period of 2020 and 25.8% over the same period in 2019. Also, I'd like to point out that exports have consistently been in the range of 30 billion or more for the past 9 months in this financial year. The highest ever exports in any quarter was also a milestone that we achieved in quarter 3 of 21-22, and the exports touched 103 billion. So, keeping all of this in mind, we feel we are well on track to achieve the export target of 400 billion. And perhaps even exceeded, which has been set for us. Normally, the growth, I'd also like to point out, is slightly higher in the last quarter of financial year. This is as per previous trends. So that is why we're very hopeful that we'll be able to achieve the target of 400 billion. This is just representing in a bar diagram the performance of December 2019, 20, and 21, where you can clearly see the steep increase in the rate of growth. Again, this is the cumulative performance over the period of April to December for the last 3 years. Again, after a small dip last year, we are now seeing a high rate of growth. Next, please. I'll just briefly talk about the top 10 export products. And as you can see, that right from engineering goods to gems and jewelry to chemicals, textiles, etc., the growth in all of them is positive. These approximately account for almost about 80% of our total exports. I'll briefly touch upon them in the next slide as well. So top 10 major commodity groups, which constitute 80% of exports, have grown by 41% over last December. This is when we look at December versus December. And each one is having a positive growth rate. Engineering goods, which constitute 26% of our exports, have grown by 37% over the last December 2020. Gems and jewelry, which account for 8% of our exports, have also grown up by close to 16%. The growth rate for some of the other important commodity groups, including ready-made garments, 22%, cotton yarn, fabs, made-up, handloom, 46%, electronic goods, 33%. 18 of the top 40 export destinations have achieved more than the target that was set for them till December. That means we've been able to achieve the target in these 18 countries as per the rate that was anticipated or fixed. The story of India's exports will perhaps not be complete unless we talk of the services exports as well. So briefly, I'll just touch upon that. Though the target was fixed for mercantile exports, but this is on the services side. The total export in services for the period April to December this year, the achievement is 178.8 billion, which compares very favorably with the performance last year, which was around 150 during the same period. A growth rate of 19.14% over last year and 11.67% over 2019-2020. The important segments which contribute to 85%, they have 85% share in total export and services, that's including telecommunications, computer information service, other business service and transportation. The growth rate has also been very encouraging. During April to December, these sectors have witnessed a growth of 21.27, which also compares, as you can see, very favorably with the performance last 2 years. In the travel and tourism sector, because of the COVID pandemic-related restrictions, the growth has not happened to the extent that we would have liked to. However, the overall growth of services is certainly very encouraging. And in services, we have, in 2019-20, we achieved the highest so far of 213 billion, and which we are hoping to exceed this year. Of course, the caveat only being that the pandemic does not put a spanner in that, but we are hoping that we can achieve something like 230 billion exports and services as well. Thank you very much, sir. I will conclude.
Okay, sir. May I request Honorable CIM to address and give a brief overview of what's happening.
Thank you very much, friends, for joining us in the first working day of the new year, and my warm wishes to you and your families in the new year 2022. Of course, the world is witnessing turbulent times. COVID is again rearing its head. And in these times, I would urge all of you also to maintain the highest level of precaution and take care of the families. I pray for your safety and your good health and your family's good health. Today, we have just seen the export data being presented to us. And I think it's a time for all Indians to feel proud that the Prime Minister's clarion call to make exports an engine of growth has been taken up in all seriousness by all sections of industry, trade, commerce, exporters, and today we are assembled to celebrate the fact that we are right on track to what he had set us out on the journey, and at $300 billion in the first 9 months, we are actually created a historic record on exports. My sincerest thanks to Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji for encouraging us to think big, for providing vision and confidence to all of us in the country, all our exporters, all our industry participants, all the missions all over the world, and of course all of us working in the government with him and under him. He in fact united all the stakeholders together with a common purpose, a common goal, and you may be aware, you may recall that he personally interacted with exporters from different sectors. He personally interacted with all the missions across the world, and through his interactions across the world with all the missions, he was able to encourage everybody to not look at incremental growth but to look at a quantum jump. And despite COVID second wave, which reared its head in the early period, in the April to June period of the last 9 months, this achievement is really both satisfying and encourages all of us to aspire for even more. In fact, I must place on record my deep appreciation for all the exporters, all the export promotion councils, industry associations, and all our missions abroad who have collectively put forth their best efforts so that India can grow its export basket, look at newer geographies where we can export, and expand the traditional exports also. As you saw, almost in every sector, there's been significant growth in exports. In a way, हमारे जो निर्यातक हैं, उन्होंने सही माने में माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के जो दिखाए हुए दिशा थी, सबका साथ, सबका विकास, सबका विश्वास और सबका प्रयास, इसको सिद्ध करके दिखाया. और जो संकल्प इस वर्ष की शुरुआत में माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के प्रेरणा से निर्यातकों ने लिया था, उस संकल्प को एक प्रकार से बहुत विपरीत परिस्थितियों के बावजूद पहले 9 महीने में अचीव किया है. मैं एक चीज ध्यान दिलाना चाहूंगा, बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग डेटा अभी अभी मुझे मिला. पहले 9 महीने अप्रैल से दिसंबर का हर महीने का जो एक्सपोर्ट फिगर है, it is the highest ever for that month which has ever been achieved. मैंने अभी तो 5-6 साल का डेटा देखा 2016 से, पर मैं समझता हूँ लगभग अंदाजन इट विल बी द हाईएस्ट, और पीछे का डेटा भी मैं स्टडी कर लूंगा. पर 2016 से डेटा आज तक का 2021 के दिसंबर तक का देखते हैं तो अप्रैल टू दिसंबर 2021 हर महीने का जो एक्सपोर्ट है ये हिस्टोरिक हाई है. और जैसा अभी आपने देखा सुना कि $103 बिलियन अक्टूबर नवंबर दिसंबर में, ये आज तक का क्वार्टरली हाईएस्ट एक्सपोर्ट इन 3 महीने में देखने को मिला. इसके साथ मैं ये भी बताना चाहूंगा कि सर्विसेज साइड में भी विशेष बल दिया गया. लगातार अलग अलग सेवा देने वाले क्षेत्रों के साथ चर्चा बनी रही, खास तौर पे आईटी सेक्टर जो एक बहुत बड़ा एक्सपोर्ट का सेक्टर है. एंड आई एम डिलाइटेड एट द नंबर्स दैट वी हैव सीन सो फार. वी हैव सीन $178 बिलियन export in the first 9 months, and we are well on track to go up to about $230 billion or upwards of that, which will also be a historic high in terms of services exports. And mind you, this is despite the fact that travel and tourism has seen a big setback. So it clearly demonstrates the resilience of the Indian economy, the power and the confidence that our exporters got from the Prime Minister's vision, the continuous monitoring that was carried out at the Prime Minister's level, at ministerial level. The Foreign Ministry supported us very, very significantly, and my thanks to my colleague, senior colleague Dr. Jaishankar, and the entire team in the Ministry of External Affairs and all the missions all over the world who took this as a challenge and have actually delivered on the ground in terms of the extraordinary performance, particularly in the labor-intensive sectors, which saw rapid export growth like engineering, gems and jewelry, ready-made garments, cotton yarn, fabrics, made-ups, handlooms, and electronic goods. I am also delighted that in agricultural export, India has made very rapid strides, and I am confident that going forward, our farmers will continue to produce high-quality farm products which will go and meet the food requirements of the world. मैं विशेष करके हमारे किसानों का धन्यवाद करना चाहूँगा जिनके निरंतर प्रयासों से ये संभव हो पाया है कि एग्रीकल्चरल प्रोडक्ट्स में भी हम बहुत बड़े तरीके से, बहुत बड़े पैमाने में हमने वृद्धि की है। साथ ही साथ अलग अलग जो स्कीम्स माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने आत्मनिर्भर भारत के तहत लाई हैं, जैसे रोडटेप को इंट्रोड्यूस किया, ROSCTL को टेक्सटाइल्स में कंटिन्यू किया। जितने पुराना बैकलॉग था एक्सपोर्टर्स के ड्यूज का, उसको पूरे को एक साथ यानी लगभग 60-70 हजार करोड़ रुपए एक साथ निर्यातकों के खाते में देने का निर्णय लिया गया, जो प्रोसेस तेज गति से चल रहा है। साथ ही साथ प्रोडक्शन लिंक्ड इंसेंटिव की जो स्कीम इंट्रोड्यूस की गई है, जिससे एक बड़ा उत्साह और बड़ा नया जोश भारत के उद्योग क्षेत्र में आया है, उसका भी लाभ आगे आने वाले दिनों में साइज, स्केल और क्वालिटी में देखने को मिलेगा। और मैं समझता हूँ हमारे स्टार्टअप्स ने भी जिस प्रकार का प्रदर्शन किया है, वो भी एक तरीके से आगे के भविष्य के हमारे एक्सपोर्ट्स को बड़ा बल देगा। अन्य अन्य स्कीम्स, वन डिस्ट्रिक्ट वन प्रोडक्ट जैसी जो स्कीम्स को फोकस किया गया, और मैं विशेषकर उत्तर प्रदेश के मुख्यमंत्री माननीय योगी आदित्यनाथ जी को बधाई देना चाहूँगा, जिन्होंने वन डिस्ट्रिक्ट वन प्रोडक्ट को लगभग एक मिशन के तौर पे उत्तर प्रदेश में बढ़ाया, और उसी के कारण इस साल का अनुमान है कि उत्तर प्रदेश अकेला 2 लाख करोड़ का निर्यात उत्तर प्रदेश से होगा, जो अपने आप में पिछले वर्ष के सामने अगर देखें तो लगभग 60% का वृद्धि होगी उत्तर प्रदेश से एक्सपोर्ट की। यूपी हैज बीन वन ऑफ द बेस्ट परफॉर्मिंग स्टेट्स in terms of one district, one product, and from a level of about 1,23,000 crore export last year, it is expected that Uttar Pradesh exports will rise to about 2 lakh crores in the current financial year, which will be a growth of nearly 60%, which is itself testimony to the good governance model and the focused effort of Uttar Pradesh to promote exports. As they say, the key to success is to focus on goals, not obstacles. We faced serious obstacles even during the first 9 months. We are currently facing the COVID pandemic, but as the Prime Minister says, India is a land of opportunities and possibilities, and we are committed to fulfilling his vision for the export sector and expanding our international trade by leaps and bounds in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We will now take questions, but one thing is very clear: we will be taking questions on the given subject and the issue which we are discussing today. Kindly raise your placards before asking questions. Yeah. Number 67. Kindly introduce also for the sir also.
सर, जो ट्रेजेक्ट्री है, ग्रोथ ट्रेजेक्ट्री है एक्सपोर्ट्स की, उससे लगता है कि आप $400 बिलियन को पार कर जाएंगे, लेकिन क्या ओमिक्रॉन की वजह से आपको लगता है कि कहीं हम पिछड़ सकते हैं?
जैसा मैंने बताया, पहले सेकेंड कोविड का वेव भी अप्रैल से जून के बीच इसी दौरान आया। हमारे भारत के उद्योग जगत और निर्यातकों में इतनी सहन शक्ति, और आज के दिन ऐसी एक संकल्प लिया है उन्होंने 400 बिलियन का, कि हम पूरी प्रयत्न में लगे हैं, और हमारा विश्वास अटूट है कि हम 400 बिलियन पार करेंगे ज़रूर। कोविड की इस बार का थर्ड वेव जो दुनिया भर में प्रभाव कर रहा है, ख़ासतौर पे डेवलप कंट्रीज़ में, यूरोप में, यूके में, यूरोपियन यूनियन में, यूएसए में, मिडिल ईस्ट में, सब जगह बहुत बड़े रूप में प्रभाव कोविड का चल रहा है, जिसके कारण शिपिंग लाइंस, कंटेनर अवेलेबिलिटी, जरूर ये ऑब्स्टिकल्स और समस्याएं आएंगी, पर हम लगे हैं कि हम पूरी तरीके से 400 बिलियन की अभी भी टारगेट लेके अपना प्रयत्न करेंगे।
Next 64.
सर, मैं शैलेश हूँ, ANI से।
आपने जैसे उत्तर प्रदेश की बात करी सर कि करंट फाइनेंशियल ईयर में 2 लाख करोड़ का एक्सपोर्ट करेंगे हम, तो बाकी के स्टेट से क्या सबसे बढ़िया एक्सपोर्ट का जो आंकड़ा आएगा वो उत्तर प्रदेश से आएगा या दूसरे स्टेट से भी आएगा?
अलग अलग स्टेट्स की अलग अलग परफॉर्मेंस है और अलग अलग स्टेट्स ने कितना फोकस किया एक्सपोर्ट पे। पहला ज़माना एक था जब राज्य सरकारें सोचती थी कि एक्सपोर्ट उनकी जिम्मेदारी नहीं, वो सिर्फ केंद्र सरकार की जिम्मेदारी है। मैं समझता हूँ गत कुछ वर्षों में जो माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने राज्यों को भी प्रोत्साहित किया है कि वो भी निर्यात को एक प्रकार से अपना फोकस प्रोग्राम बनाए, उससे नए रोजगार के अवसर बनते हैं, इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी आती है, उससे उनके टैक्सेस भी, इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस भी कलेक्ट होते हैं बड़े रूप में, इनकम टैक्स कलेक्शंस भी बढ़ती हैं। तो निर्यात को भी एक फोकस देना चाहिए। ये स्टेट्स अलग अलग प्रकार से इसको एब्जॉर्ब कर रहे हैं। उत्तर प्रदेश में इसका बहुत ही बढ़िया परफॉर्मेंस रहा, इससे मैंने उसका जिक्र किया।
74.
So what kind of...
Introduce yourself.
So my name is Karishma. I am from Business Today. So Karishma from Business Today, India Today team. So what kind of initiatives are you looking forward in 2022 to establish dominance in key markets? Just sir, you mentioned about UP. Another such plans have been on one district, one export plan, the trade infrastructure plan, and also the countries, for example, Africa is something you'd also mentioned.
The Honorable Prime Minister has built excellent relationships at the highest level across the world with world leaders, which has helped us to open the doors to negotiations on more strategic and comprehensive economic partnerships with different countries. We are looking for a free trade agreement and a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with the United Arab Emirates, which is close to finalization. We are also at a very advanced stage with Australia on concluding the interim agreement, which will cover very large areas of our interest, particularly our labor-oriented sectors like textiles, pharmaceuticals, footwear, leather products, agricultural products. So we are working with a very great focus on expanding bilateral relations with several countries. With the UK, we are hoping to launch later this month and get an interim trade agreement in place maybe by March of this year. The Canadian minister has also shown great interest at the G20. Also, the Canadian Prime Minister had expressed a desire to rapidly expand trade relations with India, and we are hoping to launch negotiations with Canada in the next 2 or 3 months. Similarly, we are already in dialogue with Israel to have a free trade agreement with them. So all these different relationships at the international level, the deep engagement that our missions abroad have started with businesses and importers in other countries to take more and more products from India, and the different schemes and projects and programs that are being initiated in India, like the One District, One Product plan, are helping exports get a significant thrust in the days to come.
Thank you.
62. 62.
Yeah, good evening, sir. This is Nivedita Mukherjee from UNI. So, with regard to the missions with whom PM had interacted on taking forward the objective, do we know which particular region has performed and who has pushed the exports?
Well, I won't take the names of specific regions right now, but I can only assure you that across the world, the missions have got sensitized, particularly after the direct interaction they had with the Honorable Prime Minister when he gave the clarion call that local goes global, make in India for the world. And post that, the missions have really taken it to heart. And across the world, there is a new buzz, a new excitement in our foreign missions, our consulates, our embassies, which is palpably visible when I see the kind of communications we receive from them, the amount of visits, despite COVID, that foreign trade ministers want to do to India, make to India. Over the last 3-4 days, while I was exchanging season's greetings with several ministers, trade ministers across the world, many of them have already indicated travel plans to come and engage with India in the next 3 or 4 months, particularly during Vibrant Gujarat. We have a number of ministers planning to come, and then in the March-April period, once we get a little free from Parliament in February. So there's a lot of excitement around the world, and I'm grateful to the missions for building up that acceptance and the recognition of Indian products across the world.
Thank you. Yeah, then 65.
सर राजीव हूँ दैनिक जागरण से। सर इस बार पहली बार हम लोग और अगले महीने ही सबसे हाईएस्ट ग्रोथ आप लोग अचीव कर लेंगे एक्सपोर्ट 330 बिलियन जो था, और इस बार टारगेट भी सेट करने जा रहे हैं सर। लेकिन सर ट्रेड चाइना के साथ हमारा ट्रेड डिफिसिट जो है वो थोड़ा बढ़ता जा रहा है इस बार भी, और जो तो क्या हम चाइना के साथ भी सर जैसे पीछे बात हुई थी 4-5 साल पहले चीन के साथ भी टॉक शुरू हुआ था कि उनके मार्केट में हमारे गुड्स को एक्सेस मिले, तो उसको लेकर भी हम लोग सर कोई टॉक कर रहे हैं, और उस डिफिसिट को बात में उसको भी कम करने के लिए क्या
मैं समझता हूँ चाइना के बारे में आपको शायद कुछ गलत फहमी है, और कुछ पीछे अनइन्फॉर्म्ड पॉलिटिकल नेताज ने, जिनको जानकारियां तो कम रहती है लेकिन कुछ ना कुछ बीच बीच में कभी कभी इटली से ट्वीट करते हैं, कभी पता नहीं कहाँ से ट्वीट करते हैं, बिना कोई जानकारी के, बिना कोई सच्चाई के, बिना कोई तत्व के। ऐसे चीज़ों का मैं अब रिस्पॉन्ड करने को अपने आप को नीचा नहीं गिराना चाहता हूँ, लेकिन उसका शायद मैंने देखा था जानकारियाँ पब्लिक डोमेन में आ गई थी कि कैसे जब कांग्रेस की यूपीए की सरकार थी 2004 से 14, उस दौरान कैसे लगभग 1000% वृद्धि हुई थी चाइना के इंपोर्ट्स में, और कैसे जब से माननीय प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी की सरकार आई है कैसे इसको हमने नियंत्रण में रखा, इसको बहुत कम बढ़ने दिया, और जो चीज़ें आती हैं उसके ऊपर कैसे क्वालिटी कंट्रोल रखा जाता है, और देश की ज़रूरतमंद चीज़ें ही आती हैं। मैं इसके लिए देशवासियों का भी धन्यवाद करना चाहूँगा जिन्होंने वास्तव में एक जागरूकता आई है कि भारत में बनी हुई चीज़ें हम ज़्यादा बड़े पैमाने पे इस्तेमाल करें।
थैंक यू एवरीवन। सर ये पीपीटी हम आपसे शेयर कर लेंगे, एंड वी विल बी शेयरिंग द मर्चेंडाइज डेटा आल्सो ऑन दिस सब्जेक्ट ओनली।
सर अभी जीएसटी काउंसिल ने जो है टेक्सटाइल पे जो बढ़ोतरी हुई थी रेट की वो रिफर कर दी है, फुटवेयर के लिए भी क्या आप ऐसे डिमांड करेंगे?
ये सब निर्णय जीएसटी काउंसिल लेती है। इसमें जीएसटी काउंसिल सब विषयों को पूरी चीज गहराई से देख के उसका निर्णय लेती है। ना फॉरेन ट्रेड पे तो कोई जीएसटी लगती नहीं है, और अगर कोई रॉ मटेरियल पे लगती है उसका पूरा रिफंड मिल जाता है, तो इसका एक्सपोर्ट से कोई संबंध नहीं, कोई संबंध नहीं है, क्योंकि जितनी एक्सपोर्ट कोई भी अगर जीएसटी लगती है पूरे वैल्यू चेन में उन सबको रिफंड मिल जाता है। अगर किसी के पास सरप्लस पे भी हो गई कोई भी लेवल पे तो वो रिफंड ले सकता है। तो ये ज्यादा कैश फ्लो का इशू था rather than anything else.
Sir, just wanted to know what type of disruption in supply lines do you see in next 3 months due to the new COVID situation? And my second question would be, sir, that you have said that due to Making India and export incentive, there will be new export growth in the future. So when you see that coming to export growth, that is adding to the export growth?
पहली बार, first of all, I do not see immediately any supply disruptions or any disruptions in the supply chains, because by and large the world has seen that the effects of this wave are relatively less harmful. So by and large the Western world, the developed countries have not restricted any movements as yet. We have also not seen any instances of lockdowns being announced in any major country like the US or UK or Europe and all. The only, if at all, the problem could be in terms of temporarily if the shipping staff, for example, gets down with COVID in a big way, there could be a short-term disruption. And that also, it is being seen that by and large most cases are asymptomatic and most cases are recovering very quickly. So I do think that we have to all maintain precautions of the highest level, but hopefully the supply lines, supply chains and industrial activity will continue in full stream.
Last question, Megha.
Since you made the comment about Uttar Pradesh and since the elections are around the corner, I just want to ask you this one question, that if there's such a quantum jump that has been observed in context of Uttar Pradesh, apart from attributing all of this to the political leadership, to what other reasons would you attribute this jump?
Well, very clearly, first of all, my comment about Uttar Pradesh was only because it's a matter of fact. It has nothing to do with the elections. And it's a reality that that state took this one district, one product very, very seriously. And if you are interested, my office will be happy to share with you the amount of effort that Uttar Pradesh did to actually identify products in each district. We had the Vanijya Saptah, which we celebrated across Uttar Pradesh in every district. Vanijya Saptah was celebrated, industry was involved, industry came on board, we had dialogue with them, officials would engage with them, what we could do to support their activities. So there was really a two-way interest to expand exports. That conscious effort could be visible. That's why I made a reference to Uttar Pradesh. I'm sure other states will draw inspiration from that and pick up the thread and expand. I see, for example, a similar interest in Tripura. So it's not about elections, but I didn't refer to each state, but Tripura is another state. Outstanding focus on exports and a continuous demand. Open a new land border, help us to take our special pineapples, I think they've made to European markets. You know, they open up new lines to Bangladesh, we can expand our trade there. The effort to bring palm oil cultivation in a big way over there. The effort to bring rubber cultivation in a big way, keeping in mind export market. So different states are really making a focused effort to bring about change. Uttar Pradesh, Tripura have done some phenomenal work in that respect. By the way, just to give you the exact figures, and I do hope you will set at rest all this false propaganda made by somebody who in any case is, as another senior leader said, not serious enough to be in India and run his politics. From 2003-04 to 13-14, in the UPA era, imports from China increased by 1,160%. But after 2014, when the Modi government came in, our imports from China increased by only 8%. Look at the drastic contrast. Point 2. Our trade deficit with China increased drastically by almost 24 times, from $1.5 billion in 2004-05 to $36 billion in 13-14. Look at the increase. $1.5 billion to $36 billion, 24 times. Somebody should ask him why that happened. Was there some other understanding because of which 24 times increase in trade deficit happened during the UPA government? Whereas we have been able to bring it down. In fact, it was 48 billion in 14-15 when we had just come into government. In 2021, it was brought down to 44 billion. So it's almost remained steady. And similarly, our overall trade has increased drastically with all the countries in the world. So with Australia, it increased 102%, for example. with South Africa 82%, with Belgium 70%, with United Arab Emirates 65%, the overall trade, whereas with China only 44%. So I can only assure you that there is no extraordinary increase with China, but I believe the economic activity overall is increasing significantly, and this clearly is signal that the investment climate is there and there is a demand being generated, or there is a huge demand for goods which will spur the investment cycle and encourage Indian industry now to identify products where there is a demand, which are often being imported and which can now be manufactured in India competitively to meet our demand. So this will actually spur domestic investment in a big way. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Thank you. Thanks for joining. China one, we will share this. I'll make up, just take a photo and share it.
दिखाओ जरा. मैंने बोल दिया ना. तो ठीक बना के इनको दे दो.
I'll share it.
आप देख लेना. Show it to secretary.